Deputy Secretary General of the Federation of Euro-Asian Stock Exchanges. FEAS Talk series is an interview series with FEAS members and FEAS friends. And today I am virtually visiting Kazakhstan, Nur-Sultan, where FEAS member Astana International Exchange is located. Established in 2017 as one of the pillars of the Astana International Financial Center, AIX operates within an internationally recognized regulatory framework with the mission to develop the public equity and debt capital markets in Kazakhstan and not only in Central Asia region. My guest today is the CEO of Astana International Exchange, Mr. Timothy Bennett. Mr. Bennett, thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.
Let's go straight to the strategic things. What are the key strategic initiatives Astana International Exchange is working on at this moment?
Yeah, I think a bit of background is helpful when we talk about this. So we were, as you said, we were formed in 2017, and we've got two sets of challenges. Firstly, we're obviously a new exchange, so we've been building out the platform or the infrastructure. But also, it's not like we're a new exchange in a developed market. We're a new exchange in a very underdeveloped capital market. So over the past 3 years, we've been working on those two things. The first, building out our exchange platform, which is, of course, technology and operations and the regulatory infrastructure, plus our organisation to support that. But then, of course, we need to develop the market. Now, one of the initiatives of the Kazakh government was a privatisation program. So over the past 12 or 18 months, we've been fortunate that that program has progressed. As we look forward into a different economic environment, then obviously the state privatisation program, which largely involves oil and gas businesses, the airline, and other businesses which have been badly affected by the economic recession, is unlikely to proceed as planned. So our focus is on two areas. One is around private sector businesses. How do we encourage in a marketplace which is traditionally not predisposed to public companies? How do we encourage private businesses to list? And then secondly, how do we develop the retail investor base? And one of the things we've seen all around the world coming out of the COVID-19 crisis has been a resurgence of retail investor interest in the equities market, and obviously it's a good opportunity for us here as well in order to develop that. So one of the things we are doing is thinking about how we can launch a range of exchange-traded products which will enable retail investors to easily access both domestic and global equity opportunities.
Good, and let's go to the instruments part. So within these 2 years, what are the most active instruments traded in your exchange, and have they changed during the last months connected with this pandemic thing?
Yeah, interesting. Actually, our trading activity has been very similar in a very micro way to what we're seeing globally. So on the equity side, our first listing was Kazatomprom. It's the world's largest uranium producer. The government has sold a significant chunk of that and done 2 sell downs over the last couple of years. So there's a lot of liquidity in that. It's co-listed on LSE, and it's a unique asset to Kazakhstan and globally. So there's always a lot of interest there. Secondly, the largest bank, Halyk, listed last year, so we see lots of activity in that as well. It's obviously, like a lot of banks, been impacted by the change in the economic environment, but still some good activity. And then finally, Polymetal is a gold miner, largely gold miner, both Russian and Kazakh assets. And again, as we've seen with gold stocks all around the world, a lot of interest in those at the moment. So equity trading volumes have gone up, no surprise there. We've also had a couple of recent public debt issues, US dollars, with relatively high yields, and there's been a lot of trading activities in those as well. And again, I think we see globally a lot of public debt issuance and particular interest from investors with an attractive yield.
Good. So to support the ecosystem of Kazakh and regional businesses to raise capital, AIX has established a dedicated regional equity market segment, which can develop greater interest from foreign and regional investors. What is AIX's next step toward developing strong and the sustainable market?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, so when we were established, our goal was to, develop a world-class exchange infrastructure. And part of that was a regulatory environment which was modelled on that of the UK, the FCA or FSA. Why was that decision made? Well, there were two reasons. One is a lot of the larger Kazakh businesses had either been listed on LSE or for the privatisation program, given their size, would also list on LSE. So we also, of course, wanted to adopt a regulatory environment which is familiar to global investors. What we find in smaller markets around the world now is, of course, the costs of regulation and compliance are going up, and therefore you need an environment which, as much as possible, reduces the market entry cost for either brokers or institutional investors. So our market rules are very much based around what we would see in terms of either the standard or premium segment on LSE. 2 years down the track, what you see is, of course, that actually a lot of the businesses, as I talked about before, the private sector businesses, which are largely only have a Kazakh footprint, have a need for capital, but the listing requirements, particularly in the premium segment of LSE, are just are not complex and costly for those issuers. It's not to say that we don't want investors to be protected. Obviously, we're very conscious of the fact that when you're developing a new market, you need to build trust. But we've developed this regional equity market segment with a simpler set of rules for companies to more easily comply. And actually, I think our disclosure requirements will make disclosures that companies make, both in the listing and the ongoing disclosures, much more understandable for investors. So we've simplified things down. We had our first cross-listing under those rules, BCC, one of the largest banks in the country. And we hope this is a lever to encourage, as I said, small and mid-sized businesses to raise some capital and to generate interest in the market from retail investors, but also provide that capital to growth for either their shareholders or those businesses.
Good. So not only the trading part as a stock exchange, but you are also dealing within the AIFC, this idea. There is also a CSD, Astana International Exchange Central Securities Depository, which is incorporated under the acting law of AIFC and responsible for daily cash and securities settlement. Recently, you are having international partnership with AIX CSD. Will you please bring some details about these partnerships?
Yeah, so again, when we think about what we're trying to build here, there are some underlying principles that are important. One is we need to be globally standard in terms of our infrastructure, at least for a small or mid-sized exchange. We're no NASDAQ or LSE or Hong Kong, but we need to be industry standard. So in terms of our trading infrastructure, we've got a NASDAQ matching engine, we have standard fixed protocols. So that lowers the cost of brokers connecting. And we've been quite successful in attracting a number of both local, or a large number of local, but also some offshore brokers as members. And clearly, both those brokers and institutional investors from offshore want a post-trade infrastructure that they are familiar with. So we've built a CSD to enable easy connectivity for global custodian banks, as well as local custodians, of course, either as part of a broker relationship, an omnibus account, or otherwise. So one of the missing pieces in the puzzle for us has been a global custodian bank that serves frontier and emerging markets. And Raiffeisen joined a month or so ago after a pretty long due diligence process on us. And they are, I would say, one of the two premier custodians in frontier and emerging markets. So they see the potential. We've been working with them for quite some time, and we look forward to a long and fruitful relationship with them. But now we've done that, so combined both trading and post-trade, plus the regulatory environment, we kind of finished this build. And we've got this platform that is low cost to connect to, and we have from an issuer perspective, the ability to mobilise institutions from around the world to invest in Kazakhstan. The real focus, of course, is getting companies to list. And as I said before, the regional equity market segment is part of that, but we need to push much harder on companies to raise either debt, which is obviously more interesting at the moment, or equity going forward to help grow their businesses.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the complex view of this, you are doing covering the whole part of the trading cycle. So let's come back to the technologies. On a global scale, you are bringing AIX brought the best technology to the market, but how the country is adopting this to these new technologies for the local market, and what the new trends are there in Kazakh market?
So, the short answer to that question is very well. Kazakhstan is technologically very advanced, and certainly in terms of the infrastructure, the physical or cloud-based infrastructure that we use, we certainly have no challenges with that. How we use that technology, we are innovating, and that's more interesting, but also more challenging for our local brokers and for local investors. So, for example, things are relatively common in other markets, such as margin trading, securities borrowing, lending. We actually, have the facility to do multi-currency settlement. All of these are new to the market, and we've been lucky. You start from a blank sheet of paper. You can think about what you're going to do. You can build these things quite quickly. Much harder to do when you have an existing infrastructure. So our task is less about building that technology, but is educating our brokers on the use of that technology. Even the fixed protocol, a number of our brokers still don't use that. So we've got a way to go in terms of ensuring that the local ecosystem can connect to that technology and use it productively. But we're getting there quite quickly, and of course, all of these things I mentioned actually make it more efficient and more cost-effective for brokers to connect with us and trade with us, but also provide them with some additional revenue opportunities for their customers.
Great. Good luck with this all initiatives that you have.
Yeah, thank you.
And now coming back to now there's this pandemic thing and all the changes that have been caused by this pandemic. So today's world is facing several challenges, and one of this is now it is coming to the normal, but work from home and the environment change. How are you encouraging your employees to stay positive in these difficult times?
Yeah, it's a challenge. So Kazakhstan has effectively been through 2 lockdowns, and in the first period, which was sort of end of March through mid-May, look, I think there was an excitement to a certain extent, or a newness to working from home. We had daily updates, we had social events on Zoom, and people felt pretty connected to the organisation. And I think part of that was it was a reasonably defined period. You could see the cases going down, you could see an end point. When we entered the second lockdown or quarantine period at the end of June, I think that fatigue starts to set in. And, depending on people's personal circumstances, if they're living with their family or with friends, or they're in a small apartment, it's actually quite difficult. So our focus during this time frame has been to ensure that we can have as much or as many people in our offices as safe. And we're obviously doing that by socially distancing, by testing people on a regular basis. But we find that people need that connectivity and that engagement with both the other people they work with, but also with the business. So, and we're getting through that. The quarantine period ended in Kazakhstan at the beginning of this week. So now, I wouldn't say life is back to normal, but we're starting to rebuild the team atmosphere that we need. It'll take a while, however, I think, before we're back to the normal in terms of engaging with our customers and other stakeholders. And I do think going forward that those interactions will be much more online than they will be face to face. Kazakhstan's a long way away from anywhere anyhow. So in a lot of ways, it's good for us. We kind of level the playing field. But we spend quite a bit of time thinking about how we engage with our customers on an online format, and requires different presentation skills, being much more prepared, having much shorter interactions with people, and and quite frankly, quite a lot of tenacity to spend all day in front of a Zoom call or a Teams call. So we're going to think about how we might ensure that we're up to that going forward over the next couple of months.
Yeah, the same is here.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got the same challenges here.
But it is always good to share, because when you are sharing also the challenge that all of us are in a part of this. So yeah, we are now used to these challenges. But in your personal opinion, what is the next challenge? What will be after COVID?
Yeah, look, I think there's a very broad set of questions here for our industry, and I'll take a very high level view of this, and I really don't have any answers. But if we reflect on what we've seen over the last 6 months, and we will see over the next years, is we are going to see an enormous amount of government borrowing, which will need to be at some point repaid by the next generation. For larger countries, that's less of an issue, but certainly for smaller countries, this is a burden on future generations. So, at the same time, we've seen asset prices, particularly equities, but it's true, I would imagine, over time with property as well, is increasing rapidly. So, we've seen this remarkable rebound in world markets as interest rates have declined, and so. The current, particularly older generations, are relatively wealthy, have been advantaged to a certain extent, and the younger generations have been disadvantaged or will be disadvantaged by repaying debt. And you add a third component to this. If we think about the industries or the sectors that are going to be most impacted by the economic recession or depression we're going through or will go through, these will be the relatively low-paid workers. So I think this exacerbates the inequality, both generational and within a generation, that we've seen growing over the last 5 or 10 years. So this is the big challenge. As I said, I don't really have any solution for that. There are some things that are promising that have come out of COVID-19. Like it or not, in relation to Robinhood, but certainly we have seen a significant amount of increase in retail investor involvement in global capital markets. That's been a good thing. One of our missions here is to ensure that we can create wealth for the next generation, and participation in equity markets in particular is part of that. The second thing, of course, which has been a theme for some time, but I think again will be challenged by COVID, is ESG in this broader sense. Kazakhstan's a large oil and gas producer, large mineral reserves, including coal, and I think there will be a resurgence or a continued increase in interest in ESG type investments. Again, because we've got a younger generation who, for a lot of good reasons, feel that they've been disadvantaged by both actions around climate change, but also, as I say, the increased costs of borrowing through the pandemic. So these are some very thorny issues, and I suspect that exchanges or capital market operators, regulators, those involved in the capital markets, will need to start dealing with these over the next 12 to 18 months, because one of the things that is critical for this economic recovery is confidence in the financial sector, and these elements that we need to bring together to continue to ensure that we've got that confidence.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. This was Fast Talks and the CEO of Astana International Exchange, Timothy Bennett. Thanks.
Thank you very much.